8-year-old Ethan Cole touched the rusted gate and the ground exploded beneath his feet. 300 motorcycles roared from underground. Armed men surrounded him before he could run. The biggest one grabbed his shoulder and said, "We've been waiting 8 years for you, little guardian." Ethan had just inherited worthless land nobody wanted. The lawyer forgot to mention 2,000 Hell's Angels lived beneath it, and they'd been watching him since the day he was born. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe now and stay until the end. Trust me, what happens to this boy will break your heart and rebuild it. The key burned cold in Ethan's palm. Mr. Whitmore's sedan disappeared down the dirt road, kicking up dust like it was running from something. The lawyer hadn't even said goodbye, just shoved a brass key into Ethan's hand and muttered, "Good luck, kid, you'll need it." Ethan stood alone at the gate, 8 years old, orphan, owner of 2,500 acres of nothing. His aunt's voice rang in his head. "That crazy old man left you his garbage." Typical. Ethan pushed open the gate. The hinges screamed. He walked. The grass came up to his chest, brown and dead, and whispering secrets he couldn't understand. No birds, no wind, nothing but silence so thick it felt like drowning. Then he saw the barn. The door hung crooked. Ethan pushed it. Darkness swallowed him whole. He pulled out his flashlight, clicked it on. His heart stopped. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. Harley-Davidsons lined up like soldiers waiting for war. Chrome gleaming, engines oiled. Someone had been here. Recently. "Hello," his voice cracked. "Anyone here?" Footsteps answered. Heavy, fast, coming straight at him. Ethan spun around. The flashlight beam caught leather. Tattoos, a beard like gray steel wool. "Don't run, boy." The voice hit him like a truck. Deep, gravel and smoke. The kind of voice that had given orders in wars and prison yards. Ethan ran anyway. He made it 3 steps before a hand the size of a dinner plate caught his collar and lifted him clean off the ground. "I said don't run." The giant turned Ethan around like he weighed nothing. "You're fast. Good. You'll need that." Ethan kicked, screamed, swung his flashlight like a weapon. The giant didn't flinch. "You done?" Ethan kept swinging. "All right." The giant set him down but didn't let go. "Name's Steele. I knew your granddaddy. Knew your mama too. And I've been waiting 8 years to meet you, Ethan Cole." Ethan stopped fighting. "How do you know my name?" "Because Wild Bill talked about you every single day until the day he died. Showed us your pictures. Told us about your first words, your first steps, everything your mama wrote him in her letters. My mother wrote to him every week for 20 years until the accident." Ethan's legs went weak. She never told me any of this." Steele's grip softened. Not gentle men like Steele didn't do gentle, but less like a trap. "She was protecting you. Thought if you didn't know about us, we couldn't hurt you." Steele's scarred face twisted into something almost sad. "She was wrong. The world hurts everyone eventually. At least here you got family to help you survive it." "Family." Ethan laughed, but it came out broken. "I don't have family. I have an aunt who hates me and an uncle who wants to sell me." "You got 2,000 brothers and sisters who die for you, boy. That count for something." "Chain." Steele whistled. Sharp, loud. They came from everywhere. From behind tractors, from inside horse stalls, from holes in the ground Ethan hadn't even noticed. Men and women in leather vests, patches covering their chests, tattoos covering their arms. Faces that had seen prison. Faces that had seen war. Faces that had seen things that would break normal people. Ethan counted 20, 50, 100. They kept coming. "Hell's Angels," he whispered. "You're all Hell's Angels." "Sanctuary chapter," Steele corrected. "Your granddaddy founded us 35 years ago. Took in every broken soldier, every rejected brother, every lost soul the world threw away." A woman stepped forward. Silver hair, kind eyes. The first kind eyes Ethan had seen since his mother's funeral. "I'm Grandma Rose," she said softly. "Your grandfather saved my life in 1987. I've been waiting to repay that debt ever since." "Repay it how, by protecting you." She touched his cheek. Her fingers were calloused but warm. "By teaching you, by helping you become the guardian your grandfather always knew you could be. Guardian of what? Steele and Rose exchanged a look. Something passed between them, fear maybe, or excitement. Come with us, Steele said. Time you saw what you inherited. Chum. The stairs went down forever. Ethan counted 200 steps before he lost track. The air grew cooler, damper. He could hear sounds, now voices, laughter, engines, life. Where are we going? Home, Rose said. The tunnel opened up and Ethan stopped breathing. A city, underground, hidden from satellites and helicopters, and everyone who'd ever wanted to destroy them. 2,000 Hell's Angels had built a city. Streets, houses, workshops, schools, children. There are kids here, Ethan breathed. Orphans, Steele said. Runaways, throwaways, kids the system chewed up and spit out. Your granddaddy took them all in. A boy Ethan's age ran past, then froze, stared. His eyes went wide. It's him, Wild Bill's grandson. He's really here. The word spread like wildfire. Within seconds, Ethan was surrounded, hundreds of faces pressing close, looking at him like he was something holy. Guardian, someone whispered. Wild Bill's blood. He came, he really came. Steele raised his hand. Silence fell instantly. Brothers and sisters, this is Ethan Cole. By blood and by law, this sanctuary belongs to him now. And by our code, Steele paused, his voice cracking, by our code that makes him family. The roar shook dirt from the ceiling. 2,000 voices screaming as one. 2,000 Hell's Angels who had waited 8 years for this moment. Ethan stood in the center of it all and felt something he hadn't felt since his parents died. He felt like he belonged. They gave him his grandfather's room, small, simple, covered in photographs. Ethan sat on the bed and opened the leather journal Steele had pressed into his hands. His grandfather's handwriting filled the pages. Neat, careful, the words of a man who knew he was building something that had to outlast him. March 15, 1989. Took in another soldier today. Name's Michael, but he wants to be called Steele. Lost his whole unit in Grenada. Government gave him a medal and a discharge. I gave him a home. June 3, 1995, Rose had her baby today. A girl, named her Hope. First child born in the sanctuary. Won't be the last. December 12, 2003. My daughter called. She's pregnant. A boy. She's naming him Ethan. I'll never meet him. She made that clear, but I'll protect him anyway. From a distance. Always. Ethan's hands trembled. He flipped to the last entry. Dated 3 months ago. They're coming for us. The land is worth billions now. Lithium, they say. Someone will find out about us soon. Someone will try to take everything. But I've prepared. The lawyers have their instructions. The trust is unbreakable. And Ethan, my grandson, the boy I've loved since before he was born, Ethan will carry this forward. I'm sorry, boy. I'm sorry for the burden I'm leaving you. But you're a Cole, and Coles don't break. Blood protects blood. Always. A knock on the door made Ethan jump. Grandma Rose entered, her face pale. Ethan, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Your aunt and uncle are here. They brought federal agents, and they're demanding to see you. The monitor showed everything. 3 black SUVs at the gate, men in suits with government badges, sheriff's deputies in tactical gear. And in the middle of it all, Aunt Linda in her fake designer dress and Uncle Frank in his too-tight polo shirt. That's my nephew in there, Aunt Linda screamed at a deputy. Those criminals kidnapped him. Ma'am, we need to verify. Verify what? He's 8 years old. He's alone with a bunch of murdering bikers. Steele stood beside Ethan, his massive arms crossed. She's good. Almost sounds like she cares. She doesn't, Ethan said quietly. She never has. I know, son. We've been watching her too. On the monitor, Uncle Frank was talking to a man in an expensive suit, not a federal agent, something else. A corporate lawyer, maybe. They kept pointing at maps, gesturing at the empty land like they were dividing up treasure. Blackstone Mining, Rose said grimly. They discovered lithium deposits under this property 6 months ago, worth over $2 billion. Let me guess, Ethan said. My aunt and uncle want to sell. Already signed papers. They get $500,000 as a finder's fee. The company gets the land. All they need is you declared unfit to manage your inheritance. and then they become my guardians, with full control of everything your grandfather built. Ethan watched his aunt hug one of the federal agents, dabbing at fake tears with a handkerchief she'd probably bought for this exact moment. What do we do? Steele knelt down, bringing his scarred face level with Ethan's. That's not my call anymore, little guardian. This is your sanctuary now. Your family. 2,000 people waiting for your orders. I made it years old. Your grandfather was 19 when he saved 47 men in Vietnam. Age is just a number. Courage is what counts. On the monitor, Uncle Frank started walking toward the main barn, the entrance to their hidden world. Ethan's heart pounded. His palms sweated. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to let the adults handle this like adults were supposed to. But the adults in his life had failed him. Every single one. His parents had died. His aunt and uncle had used him. The lawyers and social workers had shuffled him around like a problem to be solved. These people, these Hell's Angels, these criminals, these broken soldiers and rejected outcasts, they were the first ones who'd ever looked at him like he mattered. Don't let them find the entrance, Ethan said. His voice didn't shake. Seal the barn. Post guards at every exit. Nobody goes up until I say so. Steele's eyes widened. Then he smiled a real smile, the first one Ethan had seen on his face. You heard your guardian, Steele announces to the room. Move. 2,000 Hell's Angels moved. Uncle Frank pounded on the barn door for 20 minutes before giving up. Ethan watched on the monitors as his uncle kicked the rusted wood, screamed obscenities, demanded that someone come out and face him. The federal agents looked embarrassed. Aunt Linda kept checking her phone, probably calculating how much longer this was going to take. He'll be back, Rose said. Tomorrow, with more lawyers, more agents, maybe a warrant. Let him come. Ethan. My grandfather spent 35 years preparing for this. Ethan held up the journal. Everything I need is in here. Legal documents, trust agreements, evidence. He knew they'd come eventually. He made sure we'd be ready. Steele laughed, a sound like boulders rolling downhill. Wild Bill always said you were special. I didn't believe in until right now. I'm not special. I'm just tired of being pushed around. Same thing in my experience. The monitor showed the convoy leaving, kicking up dust as they retreated down the dirt road. But they'd be back. Ethan knew that. Everyone in the room knew that. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat at his grandfather's desk reading the journal by candlelight, trying to understand the man who'd loved him from a distance for 8 years. Wild Bill Cole had been a hero, decorated soldier, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, saved 47 men in Vietnam and carried the guilt of the ones he couldn't save for the rest of his life. He'd built this sanctuary because he understood something most people didn't, that broken doesn't mean worthless, that the people society throws away are often the ones with the most to give. 2,000 Hell's Angels, veterans, outcasts, criminals who'd served their time and had nowhere to go, children abandoned by families who should have loved them. Wild Bill had taken them all in, given them purpose, given them family, and now that responsibility belonged to an 8-year-old boy who still cried sometimes when he thought about his mother. A soft knock, Rose's voice through the door. Ethan, you should rest. You should. Tomorrow will be hard. I know. You're not alone in this. Whatever happens, we face it together. I know that too. Silence, then. Your grandfather would be proud of you. Ethan closed the journal and pressed it against his chest. I hope so, he whispered. I really hope so. Dawn came blood red over Wyoming. Ethan stood at the main tunnel entrance, Steele on one side, Rose on the other. Behind them, 2,000 Hell's Angels waited in formation. Men and women who'd spent their whole lives fighting wars, fighting addiction, fighting a world that wanted them dead or forgotten. Now they were ready to fight again. For their home, for their guardian, for everything Wild Bill Cole had given them. Ethan looked up at Steele. Whatever happens today, promise me something. Name it. Promise me the children are safe. Whatever else we lose, we don't lose them. Steele's jaw tightened. On my life, little guardian. On my life. The monitors flickered. New vehicles approaching, more than yesterday. News vans now. Helicopters in the distance. The world had found them. After 35 years in the shadows, the Hells Angels Sanctuary was about to become the biggest story in America. And at the center of it all stood Ethan Cole, 8 years old, scared out of his mind and absolutely refusing to run. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory words from a journal entry written years before Ethan was born. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is being terrified and standing your ground anyway. The Coles have always stood their ground. We don't break. We don't bend. We don't run. Ethan straightened his spine. Open the doors, he said. Let them come. The barn doors groaned open and sunlight hit Ethan's face like a slap. He didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't take a single step backward even though every nerve in his body screamed at him to run. Steel stood 3 feet behind him, close enough to protect, far enough to let Ethan lead. There he is, Aunt Linda's voice cut through the morning air like a broken siren. Ethan, baby, are you okay? She ran toward him with her arms open wide, her high heels sinking into the dirt with every step. Ethan watched her coming and felt nothing. Not love, not hate, just the cold recognition of a performance he'd seen 100 times before. Don't touch me. Linda stopped mid-stride, her arms dropped. For half a second, her mask slipped and Ethan saw what was underneath annoyance, calculation, greed. Then the mask snapped back into place. Sweetheart, you don't know what you're saying. These people have brainwashed you. They're dangerous criminals they're my family. We're your family. Uncle Frank pushed past 2 federal agents to reach them. His face was red, sweating, twisted with an anger he couldn't quite hide. We're the ones who took you in after your parents died. We're the ones who fed you and clothed you and put me on a pull-out couch in the living room because you didn't want to give up your home office. Frank's jaw tightened. That's not fair. You're right, it's not. Ethan held his uncle's gaze without wavering. None of this is fair, but that doesn't change what's happening. A man in an expensive gray suit stepped forward. Not a federal agent, his shoes were too shiny, his haircut too precise. Corporate. Ethan had seen men like him in lawyer offices after his parents died, circling like sharks, smelling blood. Mr. Cole, the man's voice was smooth as oil. My name is Harrison Webb. I represent Blackstone Mining Corporation. I think there's been a misunderstanding here that we can clear up very quickly. No misunderstanding, Ethan said. You want my land, you can't have it. Webb's smile didn't flicker. Son, you're 8 years old. You can't possibly understand the complexities of property law, mineral rights, environmental regulations. I understand that you paid my aunt and uncle $500,000 to help you steal my inheritance. The smile died. Behind Webb, Aunt Linda made a choking sound. Uncle Frank grabbed her arm to steady her or silence her. Ethan couldn't tell. That's a serious accusation, Webb said slowly. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. Ethan pulled a folded paper from his back pocket, a page he'd torn from his grandfather's journal at 3 a.m. when he couldn't sleep. My grandfather knew you were coming. He had people watching Blackstone for years. He documented every meeting, every phone call, every payment. That's inadmissible. That's hearsay. That's enough to start an investigation. A new voice, female, sharp. Everyone turned. A woman walked through the federal agents like they weren't even there. Mid-50s gray streaks in her dark hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Uncle Frank's car. She carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a look of absolute contempt in her eyes. Who the hell are you? Webb demanded. Margaret Chen, attorney for the Sanctuary Trust established by William Cole in 1908, and you, Mr. Webb, are trespassing on private property. This child is the legal beneficiary of a trust that has been reviewed and approved by the Wyoming Supreme Court 3 times in the past 30 years. Every legal challenge has failed. Every attempt to break it has failed. Margaret stopped directly in front of Webb, close enough that he had to take a step back. Do you really want to be attempt number 4? Webb's composure cracked. Just a little. Just enough. This isn't over, he said. No, Margaret agreed. It's not. But for today, you're going to take your federal friends and your bought and paid for guardians, and you're going to leave this property. Because if you're still here in 10 minutes, I'm going to have you arrested for harassment of a minor. You can't. Try me. The standoff lasted 5 seconds. 10, 15. Webb broke first. He turned on his heel and marched back toward the SUVs, snapping his fingers at the federal agents like they were servants. Aunt Linda lingered. Her eyes found Ethan's, and for just a moment she looked almost human. "Ethan, please. We can work this out. We're family. Blood family. That has to mean something." "It does," Ethan said quietly. "It means you should have treated me like family when you had the chance." He turned his back on her and walked into the barn. Steele followed. Margaret followed. The doors closed behind them, shutting out the light and the woman who had never loved him. Ethan made it exactly 12 steps before his legs gave out. Steele caught him before he hit the ground. "Easy, little guardian. Easy. You did good. You did real good." "I'm shaking." Ethan held up his hands. They trembled like leaves in a storm. "I can't stop shaking." "That's adrenaline. Happens to everyone after a fight, even the ones who win." Margaret knelt beside him, her sharp face softening just a fraction. "Your grandfather told me about you, said you were brave but didn't know it yet. I think he was right." "Who are you, really?" "I told you, I'm your lawyer, have been since the day you were born, even though we've never met." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Wild Bill paid me a retainer 35 years ago, told me exactly what to do when this day came. I've been waiting ever since." "Everyone's been waiting," Ethan whispered. "Everyone except me." "That was the plan. Your grandfather wanted you to have a normal childhood for as long as possible. He knew it couldn't last forever, but he wanted to give you those years." Margaret's voice softened even more. "He loved you, Ethan, more than you'll ever know." Steele helped Ethan to his feet. The shaking had stopped, replaced by something harder, colder. "What happens now?" "Now," Margaret snapped her briefcase shut. "Now we go to war." The next 6 hours were chaos. News helicopters circled overhead like vultures. Reporters gathered at the gate shouting questions at anyone who moved. Social media exploded with theories: kidnapping, cult, domestic terrorism, government conspiracy. Through it all, Ethan sat in his grandfather's study and learned the truth about the man who had shaped his entire life without ever meeting him. Margaret spread documents across the desk like battle plans. "Your grandfather established the Sanctuary Trust in 1989. It protects the land from seizure, sale, or development without unanimous consent from the Trust's board of directors." "Who's on the board?" "Originally 12 Hells Angels, who served with your grandfather in Vietnam. Most of them are dead now. The surviving members transferred their seats to designated successors." Margaret pointed to a list of names. "Steele, Grandma Rose, a man named Bone who handles security, 2 others who live in the underground community. And me? You hold the majority position, 51%. Nothing happens without your approval." Steele leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "Bill always said you were the key. Without you, the trust falls apart. The land can be sold." "Which is exactly what Blackstone wants," Margaret added. "If they can prove you're unfit to serve on the board, mentally incompetent, victim of undue influence, anything like that, they can petition the court to appoint a guardian to manage your affairs. Aunt Linda and Uncle Frank, who have already signed preliminary agreements with Blackstone. They get $500,000 up front plus 2% of all mineral extraction profits for the next 50 years. Ethan did the math in his head. $2 billion in lithium, 2% over 50 years. They'd make millions, tens of millions, maybe more. And all they have to do is prove I'm crazy." Margaret's expression hardened. "They're going to try Ethan. They're going to bring in psychologists, child welfare experts, anyone who will testify that an 8-year-old surrounded by Hells Angels is in an unsafe environment. They're going to paint these people as monsters and you as their victim." "But I'm not." "I know that. You know that. But a judge in Cheyenne who's never met any of you? All he'll see is the patches on their vests and the tattoos on their arms." Ethan looked at Steele. The big man's face was stone, but his eye told a different story. Fear. Not for himself, men like Steele had stopped being afraid of anything years ago. Fear for the sanctuary, for the children, for everything Wild Bill had built. "What do we need to win?" Margaret almost smiled. "We need to prove that this sanctuary is a legitimate organization with a track record of helping people. We need character witnesses, the more respectable the better. And we need to show that you're not a victim here. You're a leader. I'm 8. Your grandfather was 19 when he saved 47 men in Vietnam. Age doesn't matter. Character does. That word again? Ethan was starting to hate it. How long do we have? The emergency hearing is in 72 hours. Blackstone fast-tracked it through a friendly judge. We need to be ready by then, or we lose everything. 72 hours, 3 days. To prepare a defense against a billion-dollar corporation with unlimited resources and a team of lawyers who did this for a living. Ethan should have been terrified. Part of him was, but another part, a part he didn't recognize, a part that felt like it had always been there, waiting that part was ready. Then we better get started. The first witness arrived at midnight. Ethan had fallen asleep at his grandfather's desk, his head resting on a pile of legal documents when Steele shook him awake. Someone here to see you. Who? Better if you see for yourself. They walked through the underground tunnels past sleeping families and night shift workers and guards who nodded at Ethan with respect he still wasn't sure he deserved. Finally, they reached a small room near the main entrance. A man sat inside. Old, maybe 70, maybe older, with white hair, cropped military short, and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore a suit that probably cost more than everything Ethan had ever owned, and his posture was ramrod straight despite his age. Ethan Cole. The man's voice was crisp, precise, the voice of someone used to giving orders. I'm General James Morrison, United States Army or retired. I served with your grandfather in Vietnam. Ethan's breath caught. You knew him. Knew him, son. Your grandfather saved my life 3 times in 1 week. Carried me 6 miles through enemy territory with 2 bullets in his own leg. When I wanted to give up, he told me, Morrison's voice cracked. He told me that dying was easy, living was the hard part, and he wasn't going to let me take the easy way out. Why are you here? Because I owe him a debt I can never repay, and because I just flew 14 hours from Washington, D.C. to make sure his grandson doesn't lose everything he built. Morrison reached into his jacket and pulled out a letter. I've written a statement for the court, detailing your grandfather's service, his heroism, his character. Whatever those corporate bastards say about this place, no one can question the man who built it. Will that be enough? Morrison's granite face softened. I don't know, son, but I'm not the only one coming. Your grandfather touched a lot of lives, more than you know, and every single one of us is ready to fight for you. They came all night. A former U.S. senator who had served with Wild Bill in the VA system, fighting for veterans' rights for 3 decades. A doctor who had spent 10 years treating PTSD patients in the sanctuary when no hospital would take them. A social worker who had placed dozens of foster children in the underground community and watched them thrive. By morning, Margaret had 17 witnesses lined up to testify. Generals, doctors, politicians, priests, people whose word carried weight in courtrooms and congressional hearings. But it still might not be enough. Blackstone has deeper pockets, Margaret warned. They can afford to drag this out for years, decades, until the legal fees bankrupt us and we're forced to settle. Then we need something else. Ethan paced his grandfather's study, his mind racing. Something they can't fight with money. Like what? I don't know yet. He stopped at the bookshelf, his eyes scanning titles he couldn't read. But my grandfather knew this day would come. He planned for everything else. He must have planned for this too. Steele shifted in the doorway. There's one more place we haven't looked. Where the vault, under the main house, Bill sealed it up 5 years ago, said nobody should open it until you were ready. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I didn't think you were ready, but after watching you face down those corporate sharks this morning, Steele shook his head slowly. I was wrong. You're more ready than anyone I have ever met. Duh. The vault was hidden behind a false wall in the ranch house basement. Ethan had walked past it a dozen times without noticing. The door looked like regular wood paneling until Steele pressed a hidden switch and it swung inward, revealing a steel door with a combination lock. What's the combination? Your birthday, month, day, year. Ethan's hands trembled as he spun the dial. Click, click, click. The door swung open. Inside was a room about the size of a closet lined with metal shelves. No treasure, no gold, no stacks of hash like in the movies. Just files, hundreds of them. boxes and folders and binders stuffed with papers that smelled like dust and secrets. And in the center of it all, a single envelope with one word written on the front in his grandfather's handwriting, Ethan. He picked it up. His fingers felt numb. This was it. Whatever his grandfather had been planning for 8 years, whatever secret weapon he'd been preparing, it was in this envelope. Ethan opened it. Inside was a letter and a flash drive. He read the letter first. Ethan, if you're reading this, the wolves have come for our home. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to protect you myself, but I've given you everything you need to win this fight. The files in this vault contain 35 years of documentation. Every child we've rescued, every veteran we've rehabilitated, every family we've rebuilt. Birth certificates, adoption papers, employment records, medical histories. Legal proof that this sanctuary has saved thousands of lives. But that's not the important thing. The flash drive contains something else. Something I spent 20 years gathering. Evidence of every crime Blackstone Mining has committed across 6 continents. Bribery, environmental destruction, indigenous displacement, worker exploitation, things that would destroy them if they ever became public. I never wanted to use it. Blackmail goes against everything I believe in. But I kept it anyway, just in case. Because protecting this family matters more than my principles. The question is, what do you believe in? You can use this evidence to destroy them, or you can use it to negotiate, or you can lock it away and never look at it again. The choice is yours. Whatever you decide, know this, I'm proud of you. I've been proud of you since the day you were born. You carry the best of your mother in you, and the best of me, and something else that's entirely your own. You're going to change the world, Ethan. I've always known it. I love you, grandson. Forever yours, Grandpa Bill. Ethan read the letter 3 times, then he looked at the flash drive in his hand. 20 years of evidence, enough to destroy a billion-dollar corporation, enough to save his family, or enough to make him exactly the kind of person his grandfather had spent 35 years fighting against. What does it say? Steele asked from the doorway. Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a physical thing crushing the air from his lungs. What do you believe in? He was 8 years old, Esau. He wasn't supposed to answer questions like that. He was supposed to be playing video games and worrying about homework and dreaming about being an astronaut or a baseball player. Instead, he was standing in a secret vault holding a weapon that could destroy or corrupt everything his grandfather had built. Ethan, he made his decision. Oh no. Margaret stared at the flash drive like it was a live grenade. Do you understand what you're giving me? Yes. If we use this, Blackstone goes down. Not just the lawsuit, their entire company. Stock prices crash. Executives go to prison. Thousands of people lose their jobs. I know. And if they find out we have it before we go public, they'll do anything to stop us. Anything. These aren't people who play by the rules. Ethan met her eyes. Neither are we. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she laughed, a sharp surprise sound that echoed off the tunnel walls. Your grandfather was right about you. You really are something special. I'm not special. I'm just tired of losing. That's the same thing, kid. That's exactly the same thing. She pocketed the flash drive and gathered her files. I need to make some calls. Journalists, federal prosecutors, people who've been waiting for a chance to take Blackstone down for years. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. No mistakes, no mercy. No mercy, Ethan repeated. Margaret paused at the door. You know, when your grandfather first told me about you, I thought he was crazy. Leaving all this to a child, it seemed impossible. Irresponsible, even. She shook her head. But now I understand. He wasn't just leaving you a ranch or a trust fund or a community of bikers. He was leaving you a choice, and you made the right one. How do you know it's the right one? Because it's the hard one. The easy thing would have been to take the money, sell the land, walk away and forget any of this ever happened. You chose to fight instead. Margaret smiled, a real smile, the first one Ethan had seen on her face. That's how I know. She left. Ethan sat alone in his grandfather's study, surrounded by the ghosts of 35 years, and wondered if he really had made the right choice, or if he'd just started a war he couldn't win. The next morning, everything changed. Ethan woke to the sound of steel pounding on his door. Get up, now, we have a problem. He was dressed and in the command center in under 2 minutes. The room was packed and Rose Margaret Bone, a dozen other senior angels all staring at monitors showing the main gate. What's happening? Steele pointed at the screen. There were at least 50 vehicles outside now, not just SUVs and news vans tanks, actual military vehicles with mounted weapons and soldiers in body armor. National Guard, Steele growled. Governor called them in 2 hours ago, says we're a domestic terrorist threat. That's insane. We haven't done anything. Doesn't matter. Blackstone got to the governor. Probably bought him years ago. Margaret was already on her phone barking orders at someone on the other end. They're trying to force a confrontation. If they can get footage of Hell's Angels shooting at American soldiers, they can paint us as the villains no matter what evidence we have. So what do we do? Everyone looked at him. 2,000 people. 2,000 Hell's Angels who had survived wars and prisons and everything life could throw at them. And they were all looking at an 8-year-old boy, waiting for him to tell them what to do. Ethan's grandfather had prepared him for a lot of things. He hadn't prepared him for this. How many soldiers are out there? 300, maybe more, plus the federal agents from yesterday, plus private security Blackstone flew in overnight. And we have 2,000 brothers and sisters were ready to fight and die for this land. Steele's voice was flat, emotionless. But if we fire first, we lose. Everything we've built, everyone we've protected, it all goes away. And if we don't fire, they come in, they take the children, they arrest everyone with a record. They tear this place apart looking for evidence of crimes that don't exist. Steele's massive hands clenched into fists. Either way, we lose. Ethan closed his eyes. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. Not words from the journal this time. Something older. Something his mother had told him once late at night when he couldn't sleep. Your grandfather always said the best victories are the ones where nobody has to fight at all. Nobody has to fight at all. Ethan opened his eyes. Get me a camera. Steele blinked. What? A camera and something to stream live to the internet right now. Kid, what are you? Trust me. Steele hesitated, then he nodded. Bone, get him a camera. 10 minutes later, Ethan stood at the main gate, alone. Behind him, the barn doors were closed. The angels were hidden. You'd never know 2,000 people lived here unless you knew where to look. In front of him, 300 National Guard soldiers stood in formation, their weapons ready. News helicopters circled overhead. Cameras from every major network were broadcasting live to millions of viewers. Ethan held a small camera in his hand connected to a laptop streaming directly to every social media platform his tech-savvy angels could access. He pressed record. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 8 years old. 3 days ago, I inherited this ranch from my grandfather, William Cole. Some of you might have heard of him. He was a war hero, a Bronze Star recipient, a man who spent 35 years helping veterans and orphans that nobody else would help. He paused, breathed, kept going. Right now, there are 300 soldiers pointing guns at me. Not because I've done anything wrong, not because anyone here has done anything wrong, but because a company called Blackstone Mining wants to take this land and dig up the lithium underneath it, and they're willing to destroy anyone who gets in their way. On the monitors back in the command center, Ethan couldn't see them, but he knew everyone was watching. The live viewer count was climbing. 10,000, 50,000, 200,000. I'm not a terrorist. I'm not a criminal. I'm a kid who lost his parents and found a family in a place the rest of the world forgot about. The people behind me aren't monsters. They're veterans with PTSD who couldn't get help anywhere else. They're children who grew up in foster homes where nobody wanted them. They're human beings who made mistakes and paid for them and just wanted a second chance. 500,000 viewers, 1 million. Blackstone wants you to be afraid of us. They want you to think we're dangerous. They're spending millions of dollars on lawyers and lobbyists and probably soldiers to make sure you never hear our side of the story. He held up the flash drive. This contains evidence of crimes Blackstone Mining has committed all over the world. Bribery, pollution, exploitation, things that would destroy them if people knew the truth. My grandfather gathered this evidence for 20 years, hoping he'd never have to use it. 2 million viewers, 3 million. I'm not going to use it to threaten them. I'm not going to use it to blackmail them. I'm going to give it away, right now, to every journalist, every prosecutor, every person who wants to know what Blackstone really is." He looked directly into the camera. "My grandfather taught me that you don't fight evil by becoming evil. You fight it by telling the truth and hoping there are enough good people left in the world to care." 4 million viewers. So here's the truth: we're not dangerous. We're scared. We're outnumbered, and we just want to be left alone to live our lives and help people who need helping. Ethan lowered the camera slightly. "That's all I have to say. Whatever happens next is up to you." He ended the stream. For a long moment, nothing happened. The soldiers held their positions. The helicopters kept circling. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. Then a single soldier in the front row lowered his weapon. Then another. Then another. Within 5 minutes, the entire National Guard formation had stood down. And Ethan Cole, 8 years old, orphan, guardian of 2,000 Hells Angels, walked back through the gate with tears streaming down his face. The video went viral before Ethan made it back to the command center. 20 million views in the first hour, 50 million by noon. By dinner, every news network in America was leading with the story of an 8-year-old boy who had stood down the National Guard with nothing but a camera and the truth. Blackstone's stock dropped 40% overnight. The governor announced an internal review of his decision to deploy troops. And from every corner of America, people started calling. Journalists wanting interviews. Politicians offering support. Ordinary citizens asking how they could help. But Ethan didn't care about any of that. He sat in his grandfather's study, holding the letter from the vault, and cried. Not because he was Samast, not because he was scared, because for the first time since his parents died, he finally understood what his grandfather had been trying to teach him. You don't fight by being stronger than your enemies. You fight by being better than them. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough. Steele found him there an hour later. The big man didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway, his scarred face unreadable. "You know," he finally said, "your grandfather always told me you'd surprise us. I never believed him. Thought it was just an old man's wishful thinking." He paused. "I was wrong. I didn't do anything special. You stood alone in front of 300 guns and told the truth. In my experience, that's the most special thing anyone can do." Ethan wiped his eyes. "It's not over. Blackstone won't give up. They'll find another way." "Probably." Steele crossed the room and sat down heavily in the chair across from Ethan. "But that's tomorrow's problem. Today we won. Today you saved 2,000 people who had nowhere else to go. Today, your grandfather's legacy survives. For how long? For as long as you're willing to fight for it." Steele leaned forward, his ancient eyes meeting Ethan's. "That's the secret, little guardian. The fight never ends. The enemies just change. But as long as you keep getting up, as long as you keep standing between the wolves and the people who can't protect themselves, you win. Even when it doesn't feel like it." Ethan looked at the letter in his hands, his grandfather's final words. "You're going to change the world, Ethan. I've always known it." "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted. "I'm just a kid." "You're Wild Bill's grandson. That makes you a lot more than just a kid." Steele stood, his joints cracking with age and old wounds. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow the real work begins." He left. Ethan sat alone in the darkness, surrounded by his grandfather's ghosts, and made a silent promise. Whatever came next, the lawsuits, the attacks, the endless fight against people with more money and power than he could imagine, he would face it. Not because he was brave, not because he was special, but because 2,000 people were counting on him. And Coles didn't break. Sleep came in fragments that night. Ethan kept waking up, reaching for his grandfather's journal like it was a lifeline, reading passages by flashlight until the words blurred together. By 5 a.m., he gave up trying. He found Steele already awake in the command center, hunched over a laptop with dark circles under his eyes. "You should be sleeping," Ethan said. "So should you." Steele didn't look up. "We've got problems." "What kind, Mom?" "The kind that money buys." Steele turned the laptop so Ethan could see. News headlines scrolled across the screen, each one worse than the last. Hells Angels cult brainwashes orphan heir. Child exploitation ring discovered in Wyoming. Domestic terrorists use child as human shield. That's not true. None of that is true. Doesn't matter. Blackstone owns 17 media companies. They've been running these stories all night on every channel they control. Steele's jaw tightened. Your video helped, but they're fighting back. Hard. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her usually immaculate suit wrinkled, her hair escaping from its careful arrangement. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. We need to talk. Now. They gathered in the study. Rose joined them along with Bone and two other senior angels Ethan had met briefly, a woman called Razor and an old man everyone called Doc. The hearing is in 6 hours, Margaret said, and we have a problem. Besides the media. Much worse. She dropped a folder on the desk. Blackstone filed an emergency motion at midnight. They're not just trying to prove Ethan is unfit anymore. They're trying to have the entire Sanctuary Trust dissolved. On what grounds? Criminal enterprise. They're claiming Wild Bill established the trust to launder money and harbor fugitives. If they win, every asset gets seized, every member gets investigated, every child gets removed and placed in state custody. Rose's face went white. They can't do that. They can try, and with the judge they might succeed. What judge? Margaret hesitated. That hesitation told Ethan everything he needed to know. Someone Blackstone owns, he said quietly. Judge Harold Whitmore. He's been on their payroll for 15 years. We have evidence of 7 cases where he ruled in their favor, despite overwhelming evidence against them. Margaret's voice was bitter. We tried to get him recused. Motion denied. We tried to delay. Motion denied. Every legal avenue we have, they've already blocked. Ethan felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. So we're going to lose. If we play by their rules, yes, almost certainly. Then we don't play by their rules. Everyone looked at him. What exactly are you suggesting? Margaret asked carefully. Ethan didn't know, not yet, but something his grandfather had written kept echoing in his mind. The best victories are the ones where nobody has to fight at all. The judge is corrupt. Everyone knows it. But we can't prove it in his own courtroom because he controls the courtroom. Ethan's mind raced. So we prove it somewhere else. Where everywhere. The courthouse steps were packed. Hundreds of people had gathered, overnight supporters who'd seen Ethan's video, veterans wearing their old unit patches, families who'd been helped by the sanctuary over the years. They held signs and candles and American flags, chanting slogans that echoed off the stone walls. But they weren't the only ones there. Blackstone had bussed in counter-protesters. Professional agitators, Steele said, paid to cause trouble and make the angels look violent. They waved their own signs. Protect our children from biker gangs and jail the terrorists, and screamed insults at anyone who passed. Police formed a barrier between the two groups, but the tension was electric. One wrong move, and the whole thing would explode. Ethan walked through the middle of it all. He wore the only suit he owned, bought yesterday with money pooled from a dozen angels who'd never owned suits themselves. It didn't fit quite right. The sleeves were too long, the shoulders too wide, but he walked like it fit perfectly. Steele flanked him on one side, Rose on the other. Behind them came Margaret and the rest of the legal team, their faces grim with determination. Ethan Cole. Reporters surged forward, microphones thrust toward his face. Security held them back, but their questions cut through anyway. Is it true you've been brainwashed? Do you have any comment on the allegations of child exploitation? Are you being held against your will? Ethan stopped walking. Steele tensed. Kid, we don't have time. Yes, we do. Ethan turned to face the cameras. Dozens of them, all broadcasting live to millions of viewers. I'm going to say this once, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Everything Blackstone is claiming about this sanctuary is a lie. Every story they're running is a lie. They don't care about protecting children. They care about taking our land so they can dig up lithium and make billions of dollars. But the judge they bought 15 years ago, the one who's ruled in their favor 7 times despite evidence of corruption. Ethan pulled out his phone. I'm releasing that evidence right now. Every document, every payment, every secret meeting. Let the people decide if this trial is fair. He pressed send. Within seconds, his phone buzzed with notifications, shares, retweets, downloads, the evidence spreading across the internet like wildfire. On the courthouse steps, Judge Whitmore's assistant suddenly went pale, checking her own phone with trembling hands. Let's go, Ethan said. They walked into the courthouse. The courtroom was smaller than Ethan expected. Wood-paneled walls, hard benches, a raised platform where Judge Whitmore sat like a king on his throne. The judge was younger than Ethan had imagined, maybe 60, silver hair perfectly styled, a face that probably looked friendly when he wasn't scowling. He was definitely scowling now. This court will come to order. Whitmore's voice cracked like a whip. I understand there have been some developments this morning. Let me be clear, he will not tolerate any attempt to undermine these proceedings with social media stunts or public relations campaigns. This is a court of law, not a popularity contest. Your Honor, Margaret rose from her seat. Before we proceed, I'd like to renew my motion to recuse denied. Your Honor, in light of the evidence released this morning, evidence that was obtained illegally and distributed in violation of court orders. Whitmore's eyes blazed. Ms. Chen, you're on thin ice. One more stunt and I'll hold you in contempt. Margaret sat down. Her expression didn't change, but Ethan saw her hands clench under the table. Across the aisle, Blackstone's legal team looked confident. Harrison Webb sat in the center, surrounded by 6 associates in matching suits. Aunt Linda and Uncle Frank were there too, seated behind them like props in an expensive play. Webb stood. Your Honor, Blackstone Mining moves for immediate dissolution of the Sanctuary Trust on grounds of criminal enterprise, child endangerment, and conspiracy to commit fraud. We have extensive documentation proving, Your Honor. A new voice from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned. A man walked down the center aisle. Late 60s military bearing, wearing a suit that cost more than the Blackstone lawyers' suits combined. Ethan recognized him from the news. He'd seen that face 100 times on television. Senator David Mitchell, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, one of the most powerful men in Washington. Forgive my interruption, Your Honor, but I believe I have relevant testimony for these proceedings. Whitmore's face went through several colors. Senator, this is highly irregular. So is accepting bribes from a mining company, Your Honor. Yet here we are. The courtroom erupted. Whitmore banged his gavel. Webb shot to his feet, objecting loudly. Aunt Linda burst into tears, real or fake Ethan couldn't tell. Through it all, Senator Mitchell kept walking until he reached the front of the courtroom. I served with William Cole in Vietnam, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. He saved my life. He saved the lives of dozens of men who went on to become generals, senators, CEOs. And he spent the last 35 years building something that has helped thousands of veterans and children that this country abandoned. Senator, this is not the time. This is exactly the time. Mitchell turned to face the gallery, ignoring the judge entirely. I've watched these proceedings from Washington with increasing disgust. A billion-dollar corporation trying to steal land from an 8-year-old orphan. A corrupt judge protecting their interests. And media companies running lies 24 hours a day to turn public opinion against innocent people. I'm warning you, Senator. Warn me all you want, Harold. I've faced worse than you. Mitchell pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is a letter signed by 47 members of Congress demanding a federal investigation into Blackstone Mining's business practices. It includes subpoenas for every communication between this company and this court. Whitmore's gavel hand froze. Additionally, Mitchell continued, the Department of Justice has opened a preliminary inquiry into allegations of judicial corruption in this district. My understanding is that several judges have already agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. The color drained from Whitmore's face. Now, Mitchell turned back to the judge, his voice dropping to something almost friendly. We can continue these proceedings under federal oversight with every decision subject to immediate review. Or we can acknowledge that this entire case has been tainted by conflicts of interest and start over with a judge who doesn't have Blackstone's hand up his back. Your choice. Silence. Ethan held his breath. Everyone held their breath. Whitmore's gavel trembled in his hand. His eyes darted to Webb, to Mitchell, to the cameras that were definitely not supposed to be recording, but definitely were. This court, his voice cracked. He cleared his throat. This court is in recess, pending administrative review. He banged the gavel and fled through the door behind his bench. The courtroom exploded. 3 hours later, Ethan sat in a conference room surrounded by lawyers, politicians, and Hell's Angels. Whitmore recused himself, Margaret reported. He's also resigned from the bench, effective immediately. There are rumors he's already negotiating a plea deal with federal prosecutors. What about the case? Reassigned to Judge Patricia Blackwood. She's got a reputation for being tough, but fair. More importantly, she has no connection to Blackstone whatsoever. Steele leaned forward. So we won. We won the first battle. The war's not over. Margaret shuffled through her papers. The new hearing is in 48 hours. Blackstone is regrouping. They've brought in new lawyers, white shoe firm from New York, the best money can buy. They're not going to give up just because we embarrassed them. What's their angle now? Same as before, but smarter. They're dropping the criminal enterprise allegations too easy to disprove with our witness list. Instead, they're focusing entirely on Ethan's fitness as a beneficiary, meaning they're going to argue that an 8-year-old can't possibly manage a trust this complex. They'll push for a court-appointed administrator, someone they can control, to manage the assets until Ethan turns 18. That's 10 years, Rose said quietly. A lot can happen in 10 years. Exactly, they'll drain the trust with legal fees and administrative costs. By the time Ethan's old enough to take over there, won't be anything left to take over. Ethan had been quiet through all of this thinking, processing. His grandfather's journal sat open in front of him, pages marked with scraps of paper. What if I'm not the administrator? Everyone looked at him. What do you mean? Margaret asked. You said they want a court-appointed administrator because they can control them. What if we appoint our own administrator first? Someone the court would have to accept. It would have to be someone with impeccable credentials. Financial background, legal standing, no connection to the Hells Angels that could be used against them. And someone who's already proven they care about this sanctuary. Margaret's eyes widened. You're not suggesting Senator Mitchell. The room went silent. He served with my grandfather. He just risked his political career to help us. And he's one of the most respected people in America. Ethan looked at Steele. Would he do it? I don't know, kid. That's a big ask. So was walking into that courtroom today. He did that. Steele and Margaret exchanged glances. Something passed between them, doubt maybe or hope. I'll make the call, Margaret said finally. No. Senator Mitchell's answer came at midnight. Ethan was in his grandfather's study. When Margaret found him, her face transformed by something he'd never seen there before. A smile. He said yes. Ethan's legs went weak. He grabbed the edge of the desk to steady himself. Really? He said, and I quote, Wild Bill saved my life 50 years ago. Protecting his grandson is the least I can do. Margaret sat down across from Ethan, her usual sharpness softened by exhaustion and emotion. He's flying in tomorrow morning. We'll file the papers before the hearing. Will the judge accept it? She'll have to. Mitchell's credentials are unimpeachable. Vietnam hero, 30 years in the Senate, chairman of armed services, no financial interest in the outcome. If she rejects him, it'll look like the court is biased against us. And Blackstone, they'll fight it, but they're running out of options. Margaret leaned forward. Ethan, I have to be honest with you. When your grandfather first told me about this plan, I thought he was insane, leaving everything to an 8-year-old, trusting that you'd somehow figure out how to save 2,000 people from a billion-dollar corporation. And now I think he was the sanest person I've ever known, because he was right about you. She stood gathering her papers. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be the fight of our lives. She left. Ethan sat alone in the darkness, his grandfather's journal open in his lap. He'd won today. They'd won today. But Margaret was right. The war wasn't over. And somewhere out there, Blackstone was planning their next move. But the call came at 3 a.m. Ethan jolted awake to the sound of someone pounding on his door. Steele's voice urgent and sharp. Get up, now, something's happened. He was in the command center and under a minute surrounded by angels with guns drawn and faces hard with fear. Rose grabbed his arm the moment he entered. Ethan, it's your aunt. What about her? She's dead. The word hit him like a physical blow. Whatever he had expected, it wasn't this. What? How? Car accident, 2 hours ago. Lost control on the highway outside Cheyenne. Steele's voice was flat, controlled, but Ethan could see the tension in his massive shoulders. Except it wasn't an accident. What do you mean? Why, our people examined the scene before the police got there. Brake lines were cut. Professionally. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Ethan's mind raced. His aunt had been many things, greedy, selfish, willing to sell him out for money, but she hadn't deserved to die. Uncle Frank survived. Barely. He's in the hospital refusing to talk to anyone. Steele's eyes met Ethan's. But he sent a message through one of our contacts. What message? 3 words: they're cleaning house. The room went cold. Blackstone, Ethan whispered. They're eliminating anyone who could testify against them. That's what we think. Your aunt knew too much. The bribes, the secret meetings, the whole conspiracy. With her dead, there's no one left who can directly connect Blackstone to the corruption. What about Uncle Frank? He's scared, more scared than he's ever been in his life. Our contact says he's begging for protection. Ethan thought about his uncle. The man who'd taken him in, grudgingly fed him, reluctantly sold him out without hesitation. The man who'd stood next to Aunt Linda at the ranch gate, ready to steal everything his grandfather had built. The man who was now alone, terrified and running for his life. Bring him here. Steele blinked. What? Bring him to the sanctuary, give him protection. Kid, this man tried to destroy us. He helped Blackstone, and now Blackstone is trying to kill him, which means he knows things they don't want anyone to know. Ethan met Steele's gaze steadily. My grandfather built this place for people who needed help. He didn't ask if they deserved it. He just helped them. This is different. No, it's not. Ethan's voice hardened. Bring him here. That's an order. Silence stretched through the room. Every angel present looked at Steele, waiting. Finally, the big man nodded. You heard your guardian. Get it done. Bodies moved. Orders were shouted. Within minutes, a team was heading out to retrieve Frank from the hospital. Rose appeared at Ethan's side. That was brave. Stupid maybe, but brave. He's family. He betrayed you. I know. Ethan watched the monitors, watched his people mobilizing in the pre-dawn darkness. But that doesn't mean I have to betray him back. Uncle Frank arrived at the sanctuary just as the sun was rising. He looked like a different person. Gone was the arrogant, sweating man who demanded Ethan's inheritance. In his place was a hollow shell, bandaged and broken and terrified beyond reason. They brought him to Ethan's study. Steele stood guard at the door. Rose waited in the corner. Frank couldn't meet Ethan's eyes. They killed her, he whispered. They killed Linda. Just cut the brakes and let her die. I know. She was going to testify. She was getting cold feet about the whole thing. Said the money wasn't worth going to prison. Frank's voice cracked. I told her to keep her mouth shut. I told her we were in too deep to back out now. And then he broke down, sobbing. A grown man crying like a child in front of the nephew he had spent 3 years treating like garbage. Ethan felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, just the cold clarity of someone who had grown up too fast in too few days. Tell me everything. Frank talked for 2 hours. He told them about the meetings with Webb, the payments routed through shell companies, the promises of millions if they could just get Ethan declared unfit. He told them about the other people Blackstone had bought: judges, politicians, reporters, a network of corruption stretching across 6 states. And he told them about something else, something that made everyone in the room go very, very quiet. There's another kid, Frank said, another heir, someone Wild Bill had that nobody knows about. Ethan's heart stopped. What? Before your mother, before the sanctuary, Bill had a son, gave him up for adoption when he came back from Vietnam, said he wasn't fit to be a father yet. Frank wiped his eyes with a trembling hand. Blackstone found him. They've been working on him for months. If they can't get the land through you, they'll try to get it through him. Who is he? Where is he? I don't know. They never told me. But they said he was close, said he'd been watching the whole thing unfold. Ethan looked at Steele. The big man's face was stone, but his eyes burned with something dangerous. Find him, Ethan said. Find him before Blackstone does. The hearing was in 4 hours. Ethan should have been preparing, should have been reviewing documents, practicing testimony, getting ready for the fight of his life. Instead, he stood in the underground city, watching children play between the makeshift houses, listening to families laugh and argue, and live their lives like the whole world wasn't trying to destroy them. Rose found him there. You're thinking about the other heir, she said. How did you know? No, because I'm thinking about him too. She stood beside him, her silver hair catching the artificial light. Your grandfather never told us. All those years, all those secrets we shared, and he never mentioned having another son. Why? Shame maybe, or protection. Bill did a lot of things he regretted after Vietnam. Maybe giving up that baby was one of them. Rose's voice softened. Or maybe he was waiting for the right time, the right moment, and he died before it came. What if this other heir wants to sell? What if Blackstone gets to him and offers him everything? Then we lose. Just like that. Just like that. Rose turned to face him. Ethan, your grandfather built something beautiful here, something that saved thousands of lives. But at the end of the day, it's still just a piece of land, buildings and tunnels and machines that can be replaced. The people can't be replaced. No, they can't. But they're not the land. They're not the trust. They're here because they chose to be here, and they'll keep choosing as long as someone gives them a reason to. She touched his cheek. You're that reason now, not the ranch, not the money, you. I'm 8 years old, and you've done more in 1 week than most people do in their entire lives. Rose smiled. Whatever happens in that courtroom today, whatever happens with this other heir, remember one thing: family isn't about blood. It's about choice. 2,000 people chose you, Ethan, and you chose them back. She left him there, standing among the people his grandfather had spent 35 years protecting. People who were now counting on him. Toya. The courtroom was different this time. Same wooden walls, same hard benches, but the energy had shifted. Judge Blackwood sat where Whitmore had sat, but her face was open, attentive, clearly determined to give both sides a fair hearing. Blackstone's new lawyers were polished and confident, but they kept glancing at the gallery where Senator Mitchell sat in full uniform, his medals catching the light. And there was someone else, a man Ethan had never seen before. Mid-30s, dark hair, eyes that looked familiar in a way Ethan couldn't quite place. He sat alone in the back row, watching everything with an intensity that made Ethan's skin prickle. Who is that? He whispered to Margaret. She followed his gaze. Her face went pale. I don't know, but I have a feeling we're about to find out. Judge Blackwood called the court to order. Opening statements were made. Evidence was presented. Witness after witness testified to the sanctuary's good work, its legal standing, its benefit to the community. Then Blackstone called their final witness, the man from the back row. He walked to the stand with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Took the oath, sat down. Please state your name for the record, Blackstone's lawyer said. William James Cole, Jr. The man's voice was quiet but clear. I'm Wild Bill's son, and I'm here to claim my inheritance. The courtroom erupted. Ethan sat frozen, his grandfather's other child, the heir nobody knew about. Here, now, ready to take everything away. The man's eyes found Ethan's across the chaos. And for one terrible moment, Ethan saw something in them he recognized. Not greed, not malice. Pain. The same pain Ethan saw in his own mirror every morning. Whatever was about to happen, Ethan realized nothing would ever be the same again. The courtroom chaos lasted 3 full minutes before Judge Blackwood restored order. Ethan sat motionless through all of it. His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. His heart pounded against his ribs like something trying to escape. William James Cole, Jr., Wild Bill's son, his uncle, the man he'd never known existed. Order. Blackwood's gavel cracked like gunfire. I will have order in this courtroom, or I will clear it. The noise died. Everyone sat, but the tension remained thick enough to choke on. Blackstone's lawyer, a silver-haired woman named Victoria Cross, who'd flown in from New York, approached the witness stand with barely contained triumph. Mr. Cole, please tell the court about your relationship with William Cole Sr. I never had one. William Jr.'s voice was flat, empty. He gave me up for adoption 3 days after I was born. I didn't know he existed until 6 months ago. And how did you discover his existence? Representatives from Blackstone Mining contacted me. They'd been researching the Cole family line and found my birth records. Margaret shot to her feet. Objection. This testimony is clearly the result of... Ms. Chen, you'll have your chance to cross-examine. Blackwood's voice was firm but fair. Let's hear the witness out. Margaret sat, Her jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. Cross continued. Mr. Cole, what did Blackstone's representatives tell you? They told me I had a father I'd never met. A father who'd built something called the Sanctuary Trust. A father who died 3 months ago and left everything to an 8-year-old grandson I'd never heard of. William Jr.'s eyes found Ethan's across the courtroom. They told me I'd been cheated out of my inheritance by a man who abandoned me before I could walk. Objection. Margaret was on her feet again. Characterization. Sustained. Mr. Cole, please stick to facts. William Jr. nodded slowly. The facts are simple, Your Honor. I'm Wild Bill's firstborn son. Under Wyoming inheritance law, I should have been included in any trust established by my biological father. I wasn't. I'm here to correct that oversight. And what are you asking for? My fair share. 50% of all trust assets, including the land. The courtroom buzzed. Blackstone's lawyers exchanged satisfied glances. This was their play. If they couldn't take the land through corruption, they'd take it through blood. And there was nothing Ethan could do to stop it. Margaret leaned close to his ear. I need to cross-examine him. Can you handle this? Do I have a choice? No, but I wanted to ask anyway. She stood. Margaret approached the witness stand like a predator circling prey. Mr. Cole, you said Blackstone contacted you 6 months ago. Is that correct? Yes. And in those 6 months, did you make any attempt to contact the sanctuary directly to meet your nephew, to learn about your father from the people who knew him? William Jr.'s jaw tightened. No. Did you make any attempt to verify Blackstone's claims independently? I didn't see the need. They had documentation. Documentation they provided. Did you seek your own legal counsel before agreeing to testify today? Blackstone's lawyers have been advising me. So a billion-dollar corporation that wants to seize this land has been advising you on how to help them seize it. Margaret let the words hang in the air. Did they mention they've been accused of bribery, corruption, impossible involvement in a recent homicide? Objection. Cross was on her feet. Inflammatory and unsubstantiated. Withdrawn. Margaret didn't miss a beat. Mr. Cole, did Blackstone offer you any compensation for your testimony today? Silence, Mr. Cole. They offered to cover my legal expenses. Nothing else. More silence. Mr. Cole, I'll remind you that you're under oath. William Jr.'s face contorted. The mask was slipping. Ethan could see something underneath, not the confident air, but something more complicated, something wounded. They offered me $20 million. The courtroom erupted again. Even Blackwood looked shocked. $20 million, Margaret repeated, to help them steal land from an 8-year-old orphan whose parents died 3 years ago. She turned to face the gallery. And yet you claim you're here seeking justice. I am seeking justice, William Jr.'s voice cracked. I spent 35 years not knowing who I was, not knowing why I was abandoned, not knowing if my father ever thought about me even once. His eyes glistened. Do you have any idea what that's like? To know your own father chose strangers over you? The question hit Ethan like a punch to the chest because he did know. He knew exactly what it was like. Your Honor, Ethan's voice surprised everyone, including himself. I'd like to address the witness. Blackwood frowned. This is highly irregular young man. So is everything else about this case. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Blackwood considered for a moment, then nodded slowly. I'll allow it, briefly. Ethan walked toward the witness stand. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. His heart hammered so loud he was sure everyone could hear it. But he kept walking until he stood directly in front of the man who shared his blood. I didn't know about you, Ethan said quietly. Until a few days ago, I didn't know you existed. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry my grandmother didn't tell me. I'm sorry he didn't tell anyone. William Jr.'s expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. But I know something about being abandoned too, Ethan continued. My parents died when I was 5. My aunt and uncle took me in, but they never wanted me. They never loved me. They just waited for a chance to profit from me. That's not the same thing. No, it's not. But it's close enough that I understand how you feel. Ethan took a breath. Our grandfather wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. He hurt people, including you. But he spent 35 years trying to make up for those mistakes. He built something that helps thousands of people who have nowhere else to go. And he left it all to you, a kid, instead of his own son. Because I was here, because he knew me, because Ethan's voice caught, because he loved my mother and he loved me, and he was trying to protect the only family he had left. I was his family too. I know. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. Worn, creased from years of handling. I found this in his study. It was hidden in a drawer he kept locked. William Jr. took the photograph with trembling hands. It showed a young woman holding a baby. The woman was smiling, but her eyes were sad. On the back in faded handwriting, William Jr. and his mother. Day 3, I'm so sorry, son. He never forgot you, Ethan said softly. He carried this picture for 35 years. He looked at it every single day. William Jr. stared at the photograph. His mask crumbled completely. Tears streamed down his face. He never came for me, he whispered. He knew where I was. He could have found me, but he never came. No, he didn't. Ethan felt tears burning his own eyes. And I can't explain why. I can't justify it. All I can tell you is that he regretted it. Every day until the day he died. The courtroom was silent. Even the Blackstone lawyers had stopped their whispered consultations. What do you want from me? William Jr. asked. I want you to come home. Say. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. William Jr. stared at Ethan. What? Come home. To the sanctuary. Meet the people our grandfather helped. See what he built. And then decide what you want to do. Ethan held out his hand. You're my uncle. That makes you family. And in our family, we don't abandon each other. Your Honor, this is absurd. Cross stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. The witness is here to testify, not to receive therapy from a child. Ms. Cross, you will be silent. Blackwood's voice cut like a blade. The witness will answer the question. William Jr. looked at the photograph in his hands, then at Blackstone's lawyers, then at Ethan. They promised me answers, he said slowly. They promised me justice. They promised me everything I'd been denied my whole life. They lied, Ethan said simply. That's what they do. They find people who are hurting and they use that hurt to get what they want. And you're different. I don't know. I'm 8 years old. I don't know anything about corporations or lawsuits or inheritance law. Ethan's voice was steady despite the tears on his cheeks. But I know that my grandfather loved you. I know that he would want you to be part of this family. And I know that I don't want to fight you. I want to know you. William Jr. closed his eyes. The entire courtroom held its breath. Ms. Cross, William Jr. said finally, I'm withdrawing my testimony. You can't do that. We have a contract. Sue me. He stood still, clutching the photograph. I'm done being your weapon against a child. He walked down from the witness stand, past the shocked lawyers, past the buzzing gallery, until he stood directly in front of Ethan. I don't know if I can forgive our grandfather, he said quietly. I don't know if I can forgive any of this, but I'd like to try. Ethan took his uncle's hand. That's all I'm asking. Yeah. The hearing ended 2 hours later. Without William Jr.'s testimony, Blackstone's case collapsed. Judge Blackwood ruled that the Sanctuary Trust was legally valid, that Ethan Cole was its rightful beneficiary, and that any future challenges would be subject to immediate dismissal with prejudice. She also referred the case to federal prosecutors for investigation into Blackstone's conduct. But Ethan barely heard any of it. He sat in the back of an SUV as Steele drove them toward the ranch, his uncle beside him, both of them silent and exhausted and uncertain what came next. I should warn you, Ethan said finally, the sanctuary is not what you expect. An underground city of 2,000 Hells Angels. William Jr. almost smiled. I've seen the news coverage. The news coverage is wrong about almost everything. I figured. William Jr. looked out the window at the Wyoming landscape rolling past. Blackstone showed me files, documents, evidence that the sanctuary was a criminal organization, a cult that brainwashed children and harbored fugitives. And you believed them. I wanted to believe them. It was easier than believing my father had abandoned me to help strangers instead of his own son. William Jr.'s voice cracked. Does that make me a bad person? It makes you human. They drove in silence for another mile. What happens now? William Jr. asked. Now we go home. You meet the family, and then, Ethan shrugged it. We figure it out. Just like that. My grandfather used to say that family isn't about blood, it's about choice. Ethan met his uncle's eyes. You can choose to be part of this, or you can choose to walk away. Either way, you'll always be welcome here. The SUV turned onto the dirt road that led to the ranch. In the distance, Ethan could see people gathering. Hundreds of them, thousands, spilling out from the barns and bunkers and hidden shelters, forming a crowd along the fence line. What is that? William Jr. asked. That, Ethan said quietly, is your family. The welcome was overwhelming. 2,000 Hells Angels lined the road, their faces a mixture of curiosity and wariness, and something that might have been hope. They had heard about the courtroom confrontation. They'd watched it live on the news. They knew that the man walking beside Ethan had come within inches of destroying everything they'd built. But they also knew that he'd changed his mind, that he'd chosen the family over money, that he'd walked away from $20 million because an 8-year-old boy had shown him a photograph. Rose met them at the gate. William James Cole Jr. Her voice was soft but steady. I knew your father for 35 years. He talked about you more than he talked about anyone except his daughter. William Jr.'s composure cracked. He did. Every year on your birthday, he'd disappear for hours, lock himself in his study with a bottle of whiskey and that photograph you're holding. I always wondered what he was looking at. Rose touched William Jr.'s cheek. Now I know. Why didn't he come for me? Because he was ashamed of what he'd done, ashamed of who he'd become after the war. He convinced himself you were better off without him. Rose's eyes glistened. He was wrong, and he knew it. But by the time he worked up the courage to find you, you'd built a life, a family, a career. He didn't want to destroy all that by showing up as the ghost of a past you'd never known. So he just watched from a distance. He tracked your accomplishments, your graduations, your promotions. He kept a scrapbook in his desk, newspaper, clippings, photographs, anything he could find. Rose smiled through her tears. He was proud of you, William. Prouder than he ever had the right to be. William Jr. broke down. He sank to his knees in the dirt, sobbing like a child, 35 years of pain and confusion pouring out of him in waves. Rose knelt beside him, holding him the way she'd held countless broken people over the years. Ethan watched. This was what his grandfather had built. Not just buildings and tunnels and legal trusts, but a place where people could fall apart and be put back together. A place where pain was acknowledged instead of hidden. A place where family meant more than blood. And now it was his responsibility to keep it going. 3 weeks passed. William Jr. stayed at the sanctuary learning the history he'd been denied. He met veterans who'd served with his father. He read letters and journals and reports that painted a picture of a man he'd never known. He visited the graves of angels who died protecting the community. Slowly, painfully, he began to heal. Ethan watched his uncle transform. The bitter, wounded man from the courtroom gradually gave way to someone softer. Someone who laughed at Steele's terrible jokes and helped Rose in the kitchen and spent hours playing with the children who called the sanctuary home. He's going to be okay, Rose said one evening as they watched William Jr. teach a group of kids how to change a motorcycle tire. You think so? I know so. I've seen it happen 100 times. People come here broken. They leave whole. She smiled. Your grandfather had a gift for finding the light in people's darkness. Looks like you inherited it. Ethan wasn't sure about that. He still felt like a kid playing at being something he didn't understand. Every decision felt too big, too important, too likely to hurt someone if he got it wrong. But the people around him didn't seem to notice his uncertainty. They looked at him like he had answers, like he knew what he was doing. Maybe that was the secret. Maybe everyone was just pretending all the time, hoping nobody would notice. We need to talk about the future, Margaret said, appearing beside them. The legal threats are handled, but there are other challenges. The sanctuary can't stay hidden forever. Eventually someone else will come looking. What do you suggest? Legitimacy. We register as a nonprofit, apply for veteran support grants, partner with established charities. Make ourselves so visible and so connected that attacking us becomes impossible. Won't that put us at risk? Different kind of risk. Right now we're vulnerable because nobody knows we exist. If we go public, really public, we become vulnerable because everyone knows we exist. Margaret's face was thoughtful. But it also means we can help more people. Expand our mission. Build something that outlasts all of us. Ethan considered this. His grandfather had chosen secrecy, had believed that hiding was the only way to protect what he'd built. But his grandfather had also prepared Ethan for this moment, had left him evidence to use against Blackstone, had trusted him to make decisions he couldn't have imagined. Do it, Ethan said. Start the process. But I want Steele and Rose and William to be involved in every step. This isn't my sanctuary, it's ours. Margaret smiled. Your grandfather would be proud. Everyone keeps saying that. Ethan shook his head. I just hope they're right. The first public announcement came on a Tuesday. Every major news network covered it. The Sanctuary Trust, now officially registered as a 501c3 nonprofit organization, was opening its doors. Applications were being accepted for veterans seeking rehabilitation, foster children seeking placement, and anyone else who needed a second chance. The response was overwhelming. Within 48 hours, they'd received over 10,000 inquiries. Donations poured in from across the country. Politicians who'd never heard of them suddenly wanted photo opportunities. Celebrities offered endorsements. Universities requested research partnerships. This is insane, Ethan said, staring at the flood of emails on Margaret's laptop. We can't help this many people. Not yet, Margaret agreed, but we can grow, expand, open new facilities in other states, train other organizations to use our model. Her eyes gleamed with possibility. Your grandfather dreamed of something like this, but he never thought it was possible. He thought secrecy was the only way to survive. Maybe he was right. Maybe we're making a mistake. Maybe, but the only way to find out is to train. Steele appeared in the doorway. His face was troubled. We have visitors. What kind of visitors? Federal agents. 3 of them. They want to talk about Blackstone. Ethan's stomach tightened. Even with the company in shambles, even with their executives under investigation, the fear lingered. The sense that at any moment everything could be taken away. Send them in. The lead agent was a woman in her 40s named Sarah Chen. No relation to Margaret, she clarified immediately. She had the kind of face that gave nothing away and eyes that saw everything. Mr. Cole, thank you for meeting with us. Did I have a choice? You always have a choice, but I think you'll want to hear what we have to say. Agent Chen placed a folder on the table. Blackstone Mining filed for bankruptcy this morning. Their CEO has been arrested. 3 board members are cooperating with federal prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences. That's good news. It gets better. During our investigation, we discovered that Blackstone wasn't just targeting your sanctuary. They had similar operations running across 7 states. Indigenous communities, small ranchers, anyone sitting on land they wanted. Chen's expression hardened. Thanks to the evidence your grandfather collected and the testimony of witnesses you helped protect, we've been able to shut down all of it. Ethan let that sink in. His grandfather's 20 years of documentation. The flash drive that had seemed like such a dangerous weapon. It had done more than save the sanctuary. It had saved people he'd never meet. There's something else, Chen said. During our investigation, we found financial records showing payments to your aunt and uncle, much larger than we initially realized. How much larger? $2 million over the past 3 years, in exchange for information about you, your location, your habits, your vulnerabilities. Chen's voice softened. They were helping Blackstone plan something more than a hostile takeover, Mr. Cole. We believe they were planning to have you declared mentally incompetent, institutionalized, removed permanently from any position where you could interfere with their plans. The air left Ethan's lungs, his aunt and uncle, the people who'd taken him in after his parents died, the people who'd fed him and housed him and complained about him every single day. They'd been planning to lock him away forever. My aunt is dead. We know we're still investigating the circumstances of her death, but your uncle is cooperating fully. In exchange for immunity, he's provided testimony that will help us prosecute everyone involved in this conspiracy, including himself. He's a witness, not a defendant. That was the deal. Chen stood. I know it's not justice, not really, but it's the best we could do. After she left, Ethan sat alone in his grandfather's study. The walls were covered with photographs, thousands of faces, 35 years of lives saved and families built and hope restored. His grandfather had known, had understood that evil existed and that fighting it required sacrifice and patience and sometimes accepting outcomes that felt wrong. Ethan was beginning to understand too. 6 months later, the sanctuary had transformed. New buildings rose above ground, now designed by architects who specialize in sustainable community housing. Solar panels covered every roof. A school had been established staffed by teachers who'd been helped by the sanctuary over the years and wanted to give back. 2,000 residents had become 3,000. The underground city still existed, but it was no longer necessary for survival. Now it served as storage training facilities and a reminder of where they'd come from. William Jr. had taken over operations management. He'd quit his corporate job, VP of something at a company Ethan couldn't remember, and devoted himself fully to the sanctuary's mission. He still struggled sometimes, still carried pain that wouldn't fully heal. But he'd found purpose in building something his father had started. "You know," he said one evening as he and Ethan watched the sun set over the Wyoming plains, "I spent my whole life angry at a man I never knew, hating him for choices I didn't understand. And then I come here and I see what he built, and I realize what? That he wasn't a monster. He was just a broken person trying to help other broken people. And sometimes that meant making decisions that hurt the people he loved. Does that make it okay? No, nothing makes it okay, but it makes it human." William Jr. turned to look at Ethan. "You're a lot like him, you know. You've got the same stubbornness, the same need to protect people who can't protect themselves, the same willingness to sacrifice everything for family." "I'm 8 years old." "So," William Jr. smiled, "age is just a number. Character is what counts." Ethan had heard those words before, from Steele, from Rose, from Margaret. Maybe they were right. Maybe being young didn't mean being helpless. Maybe being small didn't mean being weak. The anniversary celebration drew 10,000 people. They came from across the country, veterans who'd found healing at the sanctuary, children who'd grown up within its walls, supporters who donated money or time or hope. They came on motorcycles and in minivans and on foot. They came to celebrate what Wild Bill Cole had built and what his grandson had saved. Ethan stood on a platform constructed for the occasion, looking out at a sea of faces. Steele stood beside him. Rose, William Jr., Margaret, Senator Mitchell. Hundreds of Hell's Angels in their leather vests, their patches gleaming in the afternoon sun. "I'm supposed to give a speech," Ethan said quietly, "but I don't know what to say." "Say what you feel," Rose advised. "That's all anyone can ask." Ethan stepped up to the microphone. 10,000 people fell silent. "My name is Ethan Cole. 1 year ago today, I inherited a ranch I'd never seen from a grandfather I'd never met. I was 8 years old. I was scared. I didn't understand what was happening or what I was supposed to do." He paused, breathed. "The first person I met was a giant named Steele who told me I was something called a guardian. I didn't know what that meant. I still don't, not completely, but I've learned something over the past year that I want to share with you." Another pause. The crowd waited. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about showing up for people, even when it's hard. It's about forgiving mistakes and giving second chances and believing that everyone deserves a place to belong. Ethan looked out at the faces before him. Veterans with tears in their eyes. Children standing on their parents' shoulders. Hell's Angels who'd spent their lives being called criminals and monsters finally being seen for who they really were. My grandfather built this sanctuary because he believed in that idea. He took in people the world had given up on and gave them hope. He made enemies of powerful people who wanted to destroy him, and he never backed down. Not once, not ever. His voice cracked. He pushed through. "I'm not my grandfather. I'm just a kid who got thrown into something I didn't choose and didn't understand. But I've learned that you don't have to be special to make a difference. You just have to care enough to try." He turned to look at the people beside him, his family, chosen not given. "Thank you for giving me a place to belong. Thank you for teaching me what family really means. And thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. The applause started small and built to a roar. 10,000 people cheering for an 8-year-old boy who'd faced down corporations and governments in his own fear to protect people he'd never known he had. Ethan stood in the middle of it all and felt something he hadn't felt since his parents died. He felt home. That night, after the crowds dispersed and the celebrations wound down, Ethan sat alone in his grandfather's study. The journal lay open in front of him. He'd read every word a dozen times, but tonight he turned to a blank page. He picked up a pen. For a long moment, he just stared at the empty paper. Then slowly he began to write. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 9 years old now. Today is the 1-year anniversary of the day I inherited the sanctuary, and I'm writing this because my grandfather wrote in this journal for 35 years. He documented everything, every person he helped, every challenge he faced, every lesson he learned. I want to continue that tradition. Not because I think I have answers I don't, but because someday someone else might inherit this place. Someone who feels as lost as I did. Someone who needs to know they're not alone. So here's what I've learned. Family is a choice. Every day you choose who matters to you and who you're willing to fight for. Blood is just biology. Love is action. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. I'm scared all the time, but I keep going because people are counting on me. And finally, no one is beyond redemption. Not the broken soldiers who found their way here. Not my uncle who almost destroyed everything. Not even me on the days when I feel like I'm failing everyone who trusted me. My grandfather believed in second chances. So do I. This journal is my promise to keep believing, no matter what comes next. Ethan set down the pen. Outside, the Wyoming wind howled across the plains. Somewhere in the darkness, 2,000 people slept peacefully in the sanctuary his grandfather had built and he had saved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new opportunities to fail or succeed. But tonight, for the first time in a year, Ethan Cole felt ready for whatever came next. The phone call came at 2 a.m. on a Thursday. Ethan was still awake reviewing applications for the sanctuary's new youth mentorship program when Steele burst through his door without knocking. We have a situation. What kind, so? The kind that can't wait. Steele's face was carved from granite. There's a girl, 15 years old. She's been living on the streets in Cheyenne for 6 months. Tonight she tried to steal a motorcycle from one of our brothers. And instead of calling the cops, he called us because the girl had this. Steele dropped a photograph on Ethan's desk. It showed a young man in military fatigues standing next to Wild Bill Cole. Both of them were smiling. The inscription on the back read, Danny and Bill Saigon, 1971, brothers forever. Ethan's heart skipped. Who is she? Her name is Maya, Danny Mitchell's niece, Senator Mitchell's cousin. Steele's voice softened. Danny died in a VA hospital 2 years ago, PTSD. The system failed him just like it fails everyone. Maya's been bouncing between foster homes ever since. Last one kicked her out 3 months ago. She's been surviving on her own ever since. Why didn't anyone contact us? Danny never told her about the sanctuary. Probably wanted to protect her, same way your grandfather wanted to protect you. Steele sat down heavily, but she found that photograph in his things, been carrying it everywhere, looking for the place her uncle used to talk about in his letters. Ethan stared at the photograph. Another lost soul, another broken family, another chance to do what his grandfather had done for 35 years. Bring her here. No. Maya arrived at dawn. She was small for 15, thin in the way that comes from not eating enough, not sleeping enough, not trusting anyone enough to let her guard down. Her dark hair was tangled. Her clothes were torn. Her eyes held the same wounded defiance Ethan had seen in his uncle's eyes the first time they met. She stood in the doorway of Ethan's study, arms crossed, chin raised, ready to fight. So you're the famous kid guardian. Her voice dripped with sarcasm. What are you, like 10, 9, almost 10? Great, a baby running a biker gang. This should be fun. It's not a gang, it's a family. Maya laughed. The sound was harsh, bitter, completely devoid of joy. Yeah, I've heard that before. Every foster home says the same thing. We're a family here. We'll take care of you. You're safe now. She shook her head. They're all liars, every single one. I'm not lying. Prove it. Ethan didn't answer right away. He just looked at her. Looked past the anger and the fear and the armor she'd built around herself. Looked at the girl underneath who was terrified of hoping for anything because hope had only ever led to disappointment. I can't prove it with words, he said finally. I can only prove it with time. But I'm asking you to give us a chance. One chance. If you hate it here, if you feel unsafe, if anything happens that makes you want to leave, you can go. No questions asked. No guilt trips. No threats. Just like that. Just like that. Maya studied him. Her eyes were sharp, suspicious, searching for the lie she was certain was hiding somewhere. Why, because my grandfather built this place for people like you. People who got hurt by systems that were supposed to help them. People who learned to survive by trusting no one. Ethan's voice was quiet but steady. You don't have to trust me. You don't have to trust anyone here. But you deserve a chance to rest, to eat, to sleep somewhere safe, even if it's just for one night. Something flickered in Maya's eyes, not trust that would take much longer, but something else. Curiosity, maybe, or exhaustion finally catching up with her. One night, she said, and then I decide. That's all I'm asking. One night became 1 week. Maya didn't trust anyone. She didn't talk to anyone. She ate alone, slept with her door locked, and spent most of her time watching the sanctuary's residents with the wary attention of a wild animal learning new territory. But she stayed. Ethan gave her space. Didn't push, didn't ask questions, just made sure she had food and clothes and a room of her own, the first room she'd ever had that didn't come with conditions or expiration dates. Rose kept an eye on her from a distance. Steele assigned one of the younger angels, a woman named Spark, who'd been through the foster system herself, to be available if Maya needed anything. She reminds me of someone, Rose said one evening as they watched Maya sitting alone at the edge of the underground city staring at nothing. Who your mother, when she was that age? Rose's voice was soft with memory. Same anger, same fear, same absolute certainty that the world was going to hurt her, and the only way to survive was to hurt it first. What changed her? Time, patience, people who refused to give up on her no matter how hard she pushed them away. Rose turned to look at Ethan. The same things that will change Maya, if we're patient enough. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later. Ethan was in the workshop watching Savage, the sanctuary's head mechanic, rebuild a vintage Harley engine. It was one of his favorite places to think. The smell of oil and metal, the rhythmic sounds of tools on machinery, the quiet competence of hands that knew exactly what they were doing. Maya appeared in the doorway. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there watching Savage work with the same intensity she watched everything. But there was something different in her eyes today. Something that looked almost like interest. You want to learn? Savage's voice was gruff but not unkind. He didn't look up from his work. Maya hesitated. I don't know anything about engines. Neither did I when I started, neither did anyone. Savage finally looked at her. His face was covered in scars, motorcycle accidents, bar fights, a life lived hard and fast. But his eyes were patient. Only way to learn is to start. Maya stood frozen for a long moment. Then slowly she walked into the workshop. What do I do? Savage handed her a wrench. Hold this. Watch what I do. Ask questions if you don't understand. That's it. That's it. Maya took the wrench. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she gripped it like it was the most important thing she'd ever held. Ethan watched from the doorway, careful not to interrupt. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. The moment when Maya stopped running and started building. It was just a wrench, just an engine, just a gruff mechanic who'd seen too much and talked too little. But it was a start. 6 months later, Maya had transformed. She still had sharp edges, still didn't trust easily, still kept most people at arm's length. But she'd found something at the sanctuary that she'd never found anywhere else. Purpose. She spent every spare moment in the workshop learning from Savage and the other mechanics. She had a gift for it, an intuitive understanding of how machines worked that surprised everyone, including herself. Within weeks, she was diagnosing problems that stumped more experienced hands. Within months, she was teaching younger kids basic maintenance. She's special, Savage told Ethan one afternoon. Don't see talent like that very often. She could run this whole operation someday if she wanted to. Does she want to? Don't know yet. She's still figuring out who she is. Savage wiped his hands on a rag. But whoever she becomes, it's going to be something worth watching. That evening, Ethan found Maya on the roof of the main building, staring up at the stars. He climbed up and sat beside her without asking permission. You're not going to tell me to go to bed, Maya asked him. Would you listen if I did? Probably not. Then what's the point? Ethan pulled his knees to his chest. Besides, the stars are nice tonight. They sat in silence for a while. Not uncomfortable silence, the kind of silence that happens between people who don't need words to communicate. My uncle used to talk about this place, Maya said finally. In his letters, he called it the only home he ever had that didn't hurt him. What happened to him? Vietnam, PTSD, decades of nightmares and flashbacks, and a government that pretended he didn't exist. Maya's voice was bitter but sad. He tried to get better. Really tried. But the system kept failing him. Eventually, he just gave up. I'm sorry. Don't be, it's not your fault. Maya turned to look at Ethan. But it makes me wonder, if this place existed, if your grandfather was helping veterans for all those years, why didn't my uncle come here? Maybe he didn't know how. Maybe he was too proud to ask for help. Maybe, Ethan paused. Maybe he was protecting you, keeping you away from a world he thought was too dangerous for a child. That's stupid. Maybe, but people do stupid things when they love someone. Ethan thought about his own mother, about the secrets she'd kept, about the choices she'd made to protect him from a truth he would have wanted to know. My mom did the same thing, spent her whole life keeping me away from this place because she thought it was the only way to keep me safe. And now you run it. Ironic, right? Maya almost smiled. A little. Another silence. Longer this time. I've been thinking, Maya said, about staying. Ethan's heart jumped, but he kept his voice calm. Oh, not because I trust you. Not because I think this place is perfect. But because, she struggled for words, because it's the first place that feels like it might be worth trusting someday. That's enough for now. Is it? It has to be. Trust takes time. My grandfather used to say, you can't rush healing any more than you can rush growing. Ethan stood brushing dust off his jeans. Take all the time you need, Maya. We're not going anywhere. He climbed back down, leaving her alone with the stars. The locket had been in Ethan's desk drawer for months. He pulled it out that night, turning it over in his hands. Gold worn smooth by decades of handling. Inside 2 photographs, his grandmother as a young bride, his grandfather in army dress uniform. The inscription was barely visible now. Always yours, whatever comes. Rose had told him the story. His grandmother had given it to Wild Bill the day he shipped out to Vietnam. He'd carried it through 2 tours of combat, through decades of building the sanctuary, through every crisis and triumph until the day he died. It was the most precious thing Ethan owned. Not because of its material value, but because of what it represented. Love that endured. Promises that were kept. Family that chose each other every single day. He knew what he had to do with it. Maya was in the workshop when Ethan found her the next morning. She was bent over a motorcycle engine, her hands covered in grease, her face set in concentration. Savage had given her a project of her own, a 1985 Harley that had been sitting in pieces for years. She was determined to make it run again. Got a minute? Maya looked up, wiping her hands on a rag. What's up? Ethan held out the locket. What is that? It belonged to my grandmother. She gave it to my grandfather before Vietnam. He carried it every day for over 50 years. Ethan pressed it into Maya's palm. I want you to have it. Maya stared at the locket like it was a live grenade. Why? Because you're fighting a war too, not with guns and bombs, but with everything you've been through, everything you're trying to overcome. Ethan's voice was steady. My grandmother understood something about choosing love over fear, about believing that family can survive anything. You're learning that lesson now. I thought this might help. I can't take this. It's too valuable. It's valuable because of what it means, not what it's worth. And right now it means more in your hands than in my drawer. Maya opened the locket, studied the faded photographs inside. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away. What if I break it? Then we'll fix it. That's what we do here. We fix things. Ethan smiled. Besides, my grandfather survived Vietnam with that locket. I think it can handle a teenage mechanic. Maya laughed, a real laugh this time, the first one Ethan had ever heard from her. You're weird, you know that. I've been told. She fastened the locket around her neck, tucking it under her shirt where it would rest close to her heart. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Thank me by passing it on someday, when you meet someone who needs it more than you do. How will I know? You'll know. Ethan turned to leave. Trust me, when the time comes, you'll know. 2 years passed. The sanctuary continued to grow. New facilities opened in 3 other states. The nonprofit structure Margaret had established attracted millions in funding. Veterans programs expanded. Youth mentorship initiatives flourished. What Wild Bill had built in secrecy became a national model for community rehabilitation. Ethan was 11 now, still young by any measure but old in ways that mattered. He'd faced corporations and governments in his own family's betrayals. He'd made decisions that affected thousands of lives. He'd learned lessons that most people never learn at any age. But he was still learning. The latest challenge arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. There's a reporter, Margaret said, dropping a folder on his desk, from the New York Times. She wants to do a feature story on the sanctuary, full access, interviews with residents, a deep dive into how we operate. What's the catch? No catch. She's legitimate. Won an award for her series on veteran homelessness last year. She seems genuinely interested in telling our story fairly. Then why do you look worried? Margaret hesitated. Because fair doesn't always mean favorable. She'll see everything, the good and the bad, the successes and the failures, the angels we've saved and the ones we've lost. If there's anything we're hiding, anything that could be used against us, she'll find it. Ethan considered this. The sanctuary had come a long way from the hidden bunkers and secret tunnels of his grandfather's era, but there were still things that didn't look good on paper. Criminal records, complicated histories, choices that made sense in context but might seem questionable to outsiders. Schedule the interview, he said finally. Are you sure? My grandfather believed in secrecy because he thought it was the only way to protect what he built. But we're past that now. We went public. We invited scrutiny. If we can't survive a newspaper article, we don't deserve to survive at all. Margaret nodded slowly. You sound like your grandfather. I sound like me. I just happen to agree with him on this one. Damn. The reporter's name was Jennifer Walsh. She was younger than Ethan expected, mid-30s maybe, with sharp eyes and a notebook that never seemed to leave her hands. She spent 2 weeks at the sanctuary interviewing everyone from Steele to the newest arrivals, observing programs, asking questions that ranged from thoughtful to uncomfortable. Ethan gave her full access as promised. No restrictions, no handlers, no pre-approved talking points. On her last day, she requested a final interview with him. You've built something remarkable here, she said, her recorder running on the desk between them. A community that takes in people society has given up on and helps them find purpose. Veterans, former prisoners, foster children, all living together under one roof. It shouldn't work. By any conventional measure, it should be chaos. But it's not. No, it's not. Jennifer leaned forward. Why do you think that is? Ethan thought about the question, really thought about it. Because we don't pretend we're perfect, he said finally. We don't promise people that everything will be okay or that their problems will disappear. We just promise that they won't face those problems alone. Is that enough? For some people, it's everything. Ethan met her eyes. I was alone for 3 years after my parents died, living with relatives who didn't want me, feeling like I was a burden everywhere I went. And then I came here and found 2,000 people who chose to be my family, who wanted me, who were willing to fight for me even though they'd never met me. That's a powerful story. It's not my story, it's everyone's story here. Every person in this sanctuary has their own version of it. They were alone and then they weren't. They were lost and then they found home. Ethan paused. That's what my grandfather understood. That's what he built. Not buildings or programs or legal structures. He built a place where people could stop being alone. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. Then she closed her notebook. Off the record, Sure, I've covered a lot of organizations that claim to help people. Most of them are more interested in their image than their mission. They care about looking good, not about doing good. She stood extending her hand. This place is different. You're different. And I think the world needs to know about it. Ethan shook her hand. That's what I'm hoping. Toy. The article published 6 weeks later. It was 12,000 words long. The most extensive feature the Times had run in months. It covered everything, the history, the mission, the challenges, the successes. It didn't shy away from the difficult parts, the criminal backgrounds, the failed cases, the residents who'd left and never come back. But it presented them honestly in context as part of a larger story about redemption and community. The response was overwhelming. Within a week, the sanctuary had received over $100,000 in donations. Applications for residents tripled. Politicians who'd ignored them for years suddenly wanted meetings. Universities requested partnerships. Other organizations asked for help replicating their model. But what mattered most to Ethan wasn't the money or the attention. It was a letter that arrived on a Tuesday morning. Handwritten, no return address, just his name on the envelope and a single page inside. Dear Ethan, I saw the article about your sanctuary. I read every word 3 times. And I wanted you to know that you saved my life. I'm a veteran, Afghanistan, 2 tours. I came home broken in ways I couldn't explain to anyone who hadn't been there. For years, I thought about ending it, actually made plans, had the date picked out and everything. Then I read your story about your grandfather and what he built, about the people who found family when they thought they'd lost everything. And I thought maybe I don't have to do this alone. Maybe there's a place for me somewhere. I'm not ready to come to your sanctuary yet. Maybe I never will be. But knowing it exists, knowing that people like you are fighting for people like me, that's enough to keep me going another day. And another, and another. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for being there. Thank you for showing me that hope is still possible, a fellow survivor. Ethan read the letter 4 times. Then he locked himself in his grandfather's study and cried. Not because he was sad, not because he was overwhelmed, because for the first time he truly understood what his grandfather had been trying to build all along. Not a ranch, not a trust, not an organization, a lighthouse, a beacon in the darkness. A promise that no matter how lost you were, there was always somewhere to go, someone who would welcome you, a family waiting to be found. Wild Bill Cole had spent 35 years building that lighthouse, and now at 11 years old, Ethan was its keeper. So yeah, the anniversary celebration that year was the biggest yet. 15,000 people gathered on the Wyoming plains. Veterans from every branch of service. Foster children who'd grown up and started families of their own. Hell's Angels from chapters across the country who'd heard about the sanctuary and wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves. Ethan stood on the main stage looking out at the sea of faces. Steele was there, older now, but still massive, still watchful, still the protector he'd been since the beginning. Rose stood beside him, her silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. William Jr. was in the front row, his face transformed from the bitter stranger in the courtroom to a man who'd finally found peace with his past. And Maya. She stood off to the side, her motorcycle jacket covered in patches she'd earned over 2 years of hard work. The golden locket glinted at her throat. She wasn't the terrified, angry girl who tried to steal a motorcycle anymore. She was a mentor now, teaching younger kids the skills Savage had taught her, building something of her own within the larger family. You going to say something? Steele asked quietly. I don't know what to say. Same thing you always say. The truth. Ethan stepped up to the microphone. The crowd fell silent. 5 years ago, he began, I was an 8-year-old orphan who inherited a ranch I'd never seen from a grandfather I'd never met. I didn't know anything about running a sanctuary or leading a community or fighting billion-dollar corporations. I was just a scared kid who missed his parents and didn't know where he belonged. He paused, breathed. Today, I'm 13 years old. I still don't know everything. I still make mistakes. I still wake up some mornings wondering if I'm the right person for this job. His voice strengthened. But I've learned something over these 5 years that I want to share with you. 15,000 people waited. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice. Every single person in this sanctuary, every veteran, every foster child, every Hell's Angel, every person who found their way here when they had nowhere else to go, their family because they chose to be, because they showed up, because they stayed. His eyes found Maya in the crowd. She nodded slightly. My grandfather built this place because he believed everyone deserves a second chance, a third chance, as many chances as it takes. He believed that broken doesn't mean worthless, that people who've made mistakes can still do good, that the world is better when we take care of each other instead of tearing each other apart. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his grandfather's journal. The same journal he'd found on his first day at the sanctuary. The same journal he'd been writing in ever since. This journal holds 35 years of my grandfather's work. Every person he helped, every lesson he learned, every promise he made and kept. Unan, he held it up for everyone to see. I'm going to keep writing in it for as long as I can, because the work doesn't stop. The mission doesn't end. As long as there are people who need help, we'll be here. He closed the journal. 5 years ago, I didn't know what family meant. Now I do. Family is 2,000 people who fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. Family is choosing love over fear every single day. Family is this place, these people, this mission. His voice rang out across the crowd. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 13 years old, and I'm the luckiest person alive. The roar that followed shook the earth. That night, after the celebration ended and the crowds dispersed, Ethan walked alone through the sanctuary. He passed the workshops where Maya had found her purpose, the medical center where Doc treated anyone who needed care, the school where children learned from teachers who'd once been students themselves, the housing units where families lived in peace and safety. 5 years of growth, 5 years of challenges, 5 years of learning what it meant to lead. He ended up in his grandfather's study as he always did when he needed to think. The walls were covered with photographs now, new ones alongside the old. Pictures of people who'd found their way to the sanctuary and built lives worth living. Pictures of children who'd grown up and come back to help others. Pictures of a family that kept expanding year after year, life after life. Ethan sat at the desk and opened his grandfather's journal. He turned to the last page with writing on it, his own entry from that morning, and read what he'd written. Today is the 5th anniversary of the day everything changed. I'm 13 now, old enough to understand things I couldn't understand at 8, young enough to know I still have everything to learn. Grandpa, I hope I'm making you proud. I hope the choices I've made are the ones you would have made. I hope the legacy you built will outlive me the same way it outlived you. But mostly I hope you know that I finally understand what you were trying to teach me. Family isn't about blood, it's about choice. And I choose this family. Every day, for the rest of my life. Ethan closed the journal and placed it carefully in the desk drawer. Outside, the Wyoming stars blazed across an infinite sky. Somewhere in the sanctuary, 2,000 people slept peacefully, protected by walls his grandfather had built and he had defended. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new arrivals needing help, new problems requiring solutions, new opportunities to fail or succeed. But tonight, Ethan Cole sat in the darkness and allowed himself something he hadn't felt in 5 years of fighting and growing and leading. Peace. He was home. He was loved. And no matter what came next, he would never be alone again. The sanctuary stood strong against the night, its lights burning like promises kept. While Bill Cole had built a dream, his grandson had made it real. And 2,000 Hells Angels, the most dangerous brotherhood in America, transformed into the most loyal family Ethan had ever known, would protect that dream until the end of time. Because that was what family did. That was what family would always do. The wind carried the sound of motorcycles in the distance, engines rumbling like heartbeats, like thunder, like a promise that would never be broken. Ethan smiled. Whatever came next, he was ready. The Cole Family Sanctuary continues to operate today. Over 5,000 veterans and children have found homes within its walls. While Bill Cole's legacy lives on through every life saved, every family built, and every promise kept. This story is dedicated to everyone who ever felt alone and to the families who chose them anyway. Because blood doesn't make you family. Love does.